This anime begins with a woman named Mirakudan, who is taken by a man to a safer place using a car. On the way, she seemed to have given up and chose to just die. Suddenly an attack hit the car until the driver died. Then, Mira approached him to see his condition. It turned out that the driver was holding a VCD cassette, and she took it. Unexpectedly, a helicopter in front of Mira appeared, ready to shoot her, but soon the helicopter was hit to shreds by a combat robot or armed slave. Then a man named Sagara Sousuke came out from inside the armed slave, approached her, and injected her until she was unconscious. After that, he took her to his central military base under the Japanese Sea. Arriving at the military base, Sagara, his male partner named Kurz Weber, and a female colleague named Melissa Mao immediately repaired the damage to the robot used by Sagara earlier. Shortly after that, there was a call for the three of them to come to their room, the male commander named Andrei Sergeyevich Kalinin. Arriving in the room, Andrei gave the three of them a mission to become a spy against a woman named Kaname Chidori. He orders Sagara to disguise himself as a Jindai Tokyo senior high school student. At the same time, Kurz and Melissa are assigned to help Sagara from a distance. Andrei prepared everything needed during their mission, after which the three departed. The next day, Chidori was seen taking a bath. Meanwhile, Sagara was seen tidying up the things he needed. After everything was settled, Sagara immediately ordered Kurz to ride a robot so he could monitor them at close range. Then the robot driven by Kurz teleported. When going to school, Chidori looks attractive, so she becomes the center of attention of everyone who looks at her. However, at school, her behavior towards her friends was very fierce, making Kurz, who was previously interested in her, dislike her behavior. Incidentally, that morning there was an inspection at the school gate. Sagara, who had just entered on the first day, was immediately caught carrying a gun by a female teacher named Eri Kagurazuka. Besides that, when introducing himself in front of the class, Sagara looked stiff, like a military man with a straight body and a loud voice. Afterward, Sagara told about his hobby, which often reads military books called Almanac Jane, but when he was asked about his favorite musician, Sagara answered Goro Kaokawa and Sapin Girls. Suddenly his answer made all the students laugh at him because Melissa unconsciously gave information about her favorite musician. Her answer was followed by Sagara, wearing a communication device in his ear. During sports hours, Chidori and friends talked about Sagara, who had been seen pacing in front of the women's changing room. Not long after, Sagara innocently walked into the women's changing room, then they immediately hit him with what was there. But Sagara instead pointed his gun at them and asked to join them. As a result, he was beaten by Chidori, who was annoyed with him for always doing strange things. After school, the female students apparently handcuffed Sagara, so Kurz and Melissa had to come to school to help him. After that, Melissa was seen on the phone with someone, then she gave the phone to Sagara. The guy asked Sagara not to be so stiff when he was at school, but he still thought that Chidori didn't seem to hate him for his behavior at school earlier. At the military base, Andrei and a woman named Teletha Testarossa are monitoring Sagara's movement, which looks difficult to adapt to the other students. They will also monitor his movements and ensure his progress before moving on to the next mission. At the beginning of his mission, Sagara always caused trouble. When at school, he hit a statue until it broke because he thought the statue was someone who was stalking him. After knowing it was just a statue, he pretended to have slipped. Chidori, who saw it, looked confused by his behavior. After that, Sagara followed her out of the school while telling Kurz to prepare to follow her too. When Sagara passed through the corridor, he saw that several people looked suspicious to him. As a result, he took out his gun and approached them, even though they only wanted to joke and surprise him. Sagara, who ran at high speed, even hit his teacher, who was carrying the urn. Finally, the urn broke, and then Sagara was scolded by him. His teacher couldn't understand his behavior anymore because he had made many mistakes since the first day of school. After returning from school, Sagara was immediately treated by Kurz. During these 2 days, the three of them still haven't found anything strange. Kurz thinks there's no way anyone would kidnap a high school student like Chidori. At the same time, there was someone who seemed to be negotiating with military officials. They intend to carry out their mission together to find the person they want, Chidori. They wanted to work together because another organization, called Mithril, stood in their way. Then there was a little debate until he finally shot the military officer. The next day, Chidori, who is a class president, announced that they were going to make a visit somewhere. After that, she distributes tasks to students in her class, and Sagara is ordered to be a janitor. After school, Chidori and her friends stop at a restaurant while talk about Sagara. They think that Sagara is not suitable to be a janitor. On the other hand, it turns out that Sagara is also in the restaurant to monitor Chidori. Suddenly he sees a suspicious man carrying a suitcase. Surprisingly, the man entered the restaurant only to leave his suitcase, then left. Then Chidori, who saw it, immediately chased him to return it. Fearing that it contained a bomb, Sagara immediately ran to prevent Chidori. When she chased the man, she was almost hit by a truck. Luckily, she was saved by Sagara and Kurz, who suddenly appeared. When the suitcase was opened, it was nothing but a doll and its clothes. After that, her friends came over to Chidori to ask her how she was. Then she went home by train, but Sagara was still seen following her. After Chidori found out, she immediately approached Sagara and was angry with him for following her all day. She decided to get off the train and leave him, but it turned out that Sagara was desperate to get off when the train was running until his body bounced. Until Chidori felt even more confused about what he was actually doing and what was the purpose of doing it. After that incident, they both decided to rest on the station bench. Soon afterward, Chidori asked what Sagara meant all this time following her, but he didn't want to tell his reason. She then asked about his friends and his past school, including his girlfriend. Sagara replied that he did not have a girlfriend because no woman would accept him. Hearing this, she laughed out loud. She hoped that Sagara would soon find a good girlfriend. In the evening, when Kurz was about to go home, he met a man negotiating with military officials, and the man accidentally threw something at his robot, and after checking it, it was just chewing gum. On the other hand, Chidori is on the phone with her friend and asks about her relationship with Sagara and their tour. At the military headquarters, Talitha learns that Sagara will hold a study tour from her school. Besides that, Talitha received news that there was a research site for dangerous drugs somewhere. They had to take immediate action, and one of them was by launching missiles at that place. The next day, Sagara is being trained by Chidori to distinguish between burnable and non-burnable trash. For some reason, now the two of them seem to be getting closer. After school, when Chidori and her friend were walking in the middle of the city, they met Kurz, who immediately teased them. As a result, Melissa was annoyed with his flirtatious behavior. At the same time, Talitha has ordered her men to launch a missile, but they must wait several hours to send the missile and detonate the target. On the other hand, Sagara, awake at night, heard the sound of someone entering his apartment and getting ready to attack that person. It turned out that the person was Kurz, who had just returned from sightseeing with Chidori and came home drunk. Then Sagara saw his CCTV monitoring that led to Chidori's apartment. He saw someone who looked suspicious trying to enter her room. They immediately took action and went to a predetermined place. Arriving there, Sagara prepared a hook from the apartment's roof to ambush the person while Kurz prepared his sniper and directed him to Chidori's room. But after Sagara managed to catch him, it turned out that the person was a male student named Kazama Shinji, their classmate. Worse yet, he stole Chidori's underwear and put it in his pocket. He admitted that he was ordered by his seniors to steal it. Kazama said that he did this to restore his photos of armed slaves taken while he was traveling around Japanese military bases. Hearing this, Sagara felt interested in discussing the military, and they continued to chat on the balcony of Chidori's room. Unfortunately, they were both caught by Chidori, especially Sagara, who was seen holding her underwear. As a result, she hit his head with a baseball bat. At the military base, they get information that the enemy's headquarters has been destroyed, so their mission is complete. This made the negotiating man feel disadvantaged because his place was burned, and he wanted to break the contract with the man named Goron. Meanwhile, Sagara was seen being bandaged by Kurz, who soon received a message from their captain that the mission to tail Chidori was over because the base had been destroyed. Then they also get a week off, but his study tour cannot be cancelled. The next day when the study tour departs, Chidori suddenly becomes emotional towards Sagara due to last night's incident. When they all got ready in the plane seats, Goron entered through the back door because he was still aiming for Chidori. When the plane took off, there wasn't anything out of the ordinary, but Chidori looked dumbfounded. Suddenly the plane experienced turbulence even though the weather was good outside. In the wheelhouse, 2 of the pilots had been killed by Goron, and 1 was left to follow his directions. Afterward, Goron asked the pilot to steer the plane eastward and head for Konka. The passengers began to get suspicious when the plane changed direction, where they could see the fighter plane and the place with lots of mountains through the window. They all realized it wasn't Okinawa, so the plane landed at Konka. While the others were panicking, Kazuma was happy because he could see tanks and battle robots up close. Their teacher finally realized they were not flying to Okinawa because their teacher only slept during their trip. Shortly after, Goron announced that the passengers on the plane would become his hostages. Not long after, the news immediately reached Talitha and Andre, where there were 400 people on the plane, but it was likely that Chidori was the only target. Suddenly, Goron came out of the plane's wheelhouse and went straight to Chidori's seat. He and his colleagues persuaded her to go with them for various reasons. Seeing them forcing Chidori, Sagara and their teacher were annoyed that she was being treated like that. Because their teacher said offensive words, Goron even had the intention to shoot him. Luckily, Sagara managed to avert Goron's gaze by dropping his food marks on the floor, making him suspect Sagara. After Goron came out, Sagara came out through the back door, then went to the storage room to look for tools he could use to fight. Not long after, 3 men entered the storage room and were seen putting something in a box. In another place, it is seen that the kidnapped Chidori was put into a capsule device by Goron because he wanted to find something in her brain. After the female researcher was told the process would take 6 hours, he got angry and strangled the researcher. After the three of them left, Sagara immediately opened the box in the tool storage area to see what things they were hiding inside. It turned out that the three of them put a patch bomb. After knowing it, Sagara ran away from the place and tried to contact the headquarters to provide information that he was in danger because he had no weapons to fight the enemy. Then he informed headquarters that the mastermind of all this was Goron. He said that Goron was a dangerous person. In the past, he had attacked an area that made Andre feel annoyed that he and Sagara went down to the battlefield. Even when Sagara had shot his head at that time, there is a possibility that the one who was shot was not the real Goron. On the other hand, when Sagara was about to leave, suddenly, someone pointed a gun from behind him. Since there was nothing else to do, he immediately turned around, then fought the man with an electrocution device. At the research site, Chidori started to wake up, but she was not allowed to leave by the female researcher. At the military base, Andre ordered all his soldiers to rush to save the hostages and Sagara. But before that, they were asked to defuse the bomb in the luggage storage box, as Sagara had informed them. On the other hand, Sagara has managed to catch the man who electrocuted him earlier, leaving him to look for Chidori's whereabouts. Arriving at the research room, he heard gunshots, making him hesitate to approach. But thinking about Chidori's safety, he finally dared to barge in there no matter what. Chidori was put into a tool, but she continued to rebel because she didn't want to be treated like that. The researcher opened a large capsule, but she immediately hit the woman and fled from there. When she was about to open the door, the researcher immediately fired a gun. Not long after, two men arrived who immediately brought her to the researcher for an injection. Fortunately, Sagara appeared and electrocuted the two men until they fainted. Then Sagara asked the researcher for an explanation of what they had done. They replied that he wanted to know if Chidori was a real whispered or not because the device could retrieve the information in her brain. Then two robots appeared that shot at them. Seeing that, Sagara took the gun belonging to one of the men who had fainted earlier and used it to attack the robot. On the other hand, their teachers are still sad after Chidori was kidnapped by Goron. Kazama was worried about Sagara, but the others ignored him. Meanwhile, they were still involved in a shootout while escaping from there using a car. But that person keeps shooting at him, and Chidori becomes curious about who Sagara is. Then, Sagara admits that he is a sergeant from Mithril, but Chidori still doesn't believe him and thinks he's just a military maniac. While talking, Sagara crashed the car into a warehouse door containing an armed slave driving it. Unfortunately, Chidori still doesn't believe in his ability to ride an armed slave. Because of that, he proves it. At the same time, the enemy began to approach, then Sagara immediately fought and managed to paralyze the two robots. Shortly after, he took Chidori away to the middle of the forest. On the other hand, Kurz and Melissa were getting ready to head to Sagara's location, while those who were on the run received attacks from the enemy but could not be detected by his armed slave. Finally, his robot was attacked several times, and the one that attacked him appeared. It turns out that the robot was driven by Goron. When he saw his face, Sagara recalled the previous incident. Goron said that after the shooting incident, his body was implanted by a tool so that he could come back to life. He is targeting Chidori because, in her brain, there is a lot of information about making a destructive device that can rival nuclear. When he wants to kill her, Kurz appears and thwarts him. Not long after, another military force arrived there. Melissa immediately secured the bomb and evacuated all the passengers. But their teacher was still worried about Chidori and asked for help from one of the military who was there. On the other hand, Chidori and Sagara are still running away, while Kurz is still struggling against the strong Goron. While attacking from a distance, Kurz's shots missed until he decided to engage in close combat. Unfortunately, his signal was cut off, so his position was pressed. On the other hand, the plane carrying the hostages could steer and prepare to take off without knowing that Chidori and Sagara were still left behind. Finally, the hostages who were on the plane were rescued, but their condition is not yet known. Shortly after, other military troops found Kurz's armed slave, which had been destroyed and burned, but it seemed that Kurz was still alive and had left his armed slave. When they were going to look for him, Andre instead asked them to return because the place would be destroyed. As a result, they were forced to return to the military base. On the other hand, Goron looks fine, but he gets a call from someone telling him that Chidori and Sagara are running toward the forest. Sure enough, they were walking towards the forest. Goron promised to continue to look after Chidori to complete his mission. Then, Chidori and Sagara sat under a tree. Sagara tried to heal the wound in his stomach and intended to continue his journey back. But Chidori still hesitates to trust him and doesn't want to go with him. However, they were surprised to see Kurz, who was also there. At the military base, Talitha still wants to save Sagara, and Andre feels that Kurz is still alive. Actually, the central military base could have helped Sagara and the others by issuing armed slave ARX-7, but that was still being considered by them. In the middle of the forest, the injured Kurz was carried in a wagon, but after walking for a while, they returned to rest. Because the situation was increasingly unclear, Sagara ordered Chidori to bring the radio to the beach so she could contact the central military base. But she proposes to burn the forest and write a note because every 12 hours, the spy satellites will see them. The next day, Sagara went to look for kerosene while Kurz talked with Chidori about the research that Goron had done earlier. While telling the story, she felt something strange, and without realizing it, she uttered words that only military members knew. Still, Chidori herself did not understand why she could speak like that. She suddenly looked like someone who had lost her mind. She tore her clothes in front of Kurz. On the other hand, Sagara burned the forest by forming a letter, then returned to where Kurz and Chidori were. Arriving there, he was surprised by the presence of the enemy, who knew their location. Soon after, they shot each other. Suddenly, the ARX-7 robot was sent by Andre. Knowing that, Sagara immediately approached the robot and steered it until there was another shootout. In the middle of the battle, Goron came using his robot. Then there was a fierce battle between them. Fortunately, Goron was cornered. Seeing that, Sagara took the opportunity to attack him. He installed a shield that could restore the opponent's attack to cause very severe damage. However, the ARX-7 robot can quickly scan the damage and automatically repair it, and even the robot can automatically install the Lambda driver. On the other hand, Chidori started to talk gibberish again. According to her, there was power in Sagara's robot, but he still couldn't control it. After that, Chidori banged her head against a tree. Then, she uses Kurz's radio to connect with Sagara to give him a hint. Actually, Goron's robot has very advanced technology, but now ARX-7 has equal strength with the robot, so Sagara still has a chance to win. Afterward, Goron started to approach and attack Sagara. Chidori tells Sagara how to control the ARX-7 robot with his mind, but he didn't seem able to do that. Hearing that, Chidori tried to calm him. Along with Goron, who is about to attack, Sagara seems to have been able to control his mind to control ARX-7. During the fight, Sagara managed to corner Goron until finally, Goron lost. After that, Sagara took Kurz and Chidori flying using ARX-7, then left the place to go to the submarine, their headquarters. When they are almost at the beach, many robots will attack them. Luckily, Melissa came so Sagara could break into the submarine, so the three of them survived. Arriving at the headquarters, Sagara was still staring at the ARX-7 robot. Then Andre approached him to ask about Goron. Sagara said that he was sure that this time Goron had died. Then Andre explained simply to Sagara that RX-7 has a high level of technology. After hearing the explanation, he asks about the relationship between Chidori and ARX-7. Andre thinks she is not a whispered and has nothing to do with ARX-7. On the other hand, Melissa takes Chidori to a Tokyo hospital. At first, she wanted to erase Chidori's memory of what had happened to her, but because she tried to keep it all a secret, Melissa finally freed her. Not long after, her school friends and teacher visited Chidori. They were all moved because she was still able to survive. It turned out that Sagara came to visit her while giving her something that contained insurance. The next day, Chidori and Sagara return to school and act. He throws a smoke bomb into the classroom and then invites her to run. She is very annoyed with his annoying behavior. Long story short, the midterm exams arrived, and as usual, Sagara brought another gun to school. Chidori, who went to school by train, met a male student named Shirai, who greeted her. Apparently, Shirai is a person who likes her. Even he confesses his love for her and slightly forces her to accept it. Not long after Sagara came, he immediately helped Chidori and asked her to leave. Arriving at school, Shirai's girlfriend named Mizuki Inaba quickly knew the news. As a result, she always followed Chidori at school. Arriving at school, Sagara still followed Shirai to the toilet because he was always flirting with other women. Knowing this, Sagara told her and asked her to go to the toilet. Arriving there, the men's bathroom was locked and sealed. Chidori barged in and scolded Sagara. Then Mizuki came to the men's restroom, where Shirai seemed to no longer love Mizuki, and left her. When class ended, Chidori went home with Sagara by train. Arriving at the station, it turns out that Mizuki was there crying and calling Shirai. Upon seeing Chidori, Mizuki holds her accountable because she broke up with Shirai, and instead, Sagara has to date her tomorrow. Then the three of them went to Chidori's house to practice dating because tomorrow Mizuki would invite Sagara to meet her friends. However, whenever Mizuki talks to Sagara, he always connects with his experience while he is in the military. Actually, deep down, she wants to hear him talk about his excellence in school lessons like Shirai. As a result, Chidori, who was listening to him, was annoyed with him and tired of explaining to Sagara while shouting. When Chidori went to sleep, they were still practicing and making noise. It made her couldn't sleep. Even she imagined that Sagara would practice kissing Mizuki. The next day, Mizuki and Chidori met Mizuki's three female friends, and not long after, Sagara came and pretended to be Shirai. At first, her friends were already suspicious of his attitude, which was too talkative to Mizuki. After they went karaoke and took a ride on the lake, her friends started complaining because the Shirai that Mizuki was talking about was very different from the one in front of them. Accidentally, the real Shirai came there with another woman. Then Chidori and Sagara tried to drive him out of there. Suddenly, her friends said that they didn't care who Mizuki's boyfriend was. The most important thing is that they love each other and are proven by kissing. The innocent Sagara immediately kissed Mizuki's lips, making Chidori annoyed seeing him. Because she was shocked, Mizuki pushed him into the lake. After that, Sagara was silent because he's still thinking about his mistake and why Mizuki pushed him. Chidori explained to him, but Sagara replied that he was used to giving artificial respiration by kissing the lips of another colleague. Hearing this, Chidori forgave him and helped him out of the lake. On the other hand, there is a man named Takuma, who is asking something to the security officer while showing a paper. But when he saw that the security tie wasn't neat, he was so annoyed that he strangled the security guard's neck. In the air, Sagara, Melissa, and Kurz are being ordered to find the terrorists being targeted by Talitha. Arriving at the terrorist headquarters, the target they were looking for was not there. Even the base looked empty, so Talitha told them to return to the military base. At the same time, Andre calls her to tell her that her target is with him. Out of nowhere, Sagara remembered his promise to study Japanese history with Chidori. Then, he said goodbye to Kurz and Melissa and left them. Meanwhile, Chidori is playing baseball with her friends at school. When she hit the ball in annoyance, suddenly, the ball turned again. It turns out that her hitting the ball hit Sagara's robot, which is about to land on the baseball field, producing a blast of dust for all of them. Not long after, Sagara came down from his robot. He sacrificed coming from the South China Sea to Japan to keep his promise. Then they went back into the classroom while eating a lot of lunch brought by Chidori. At that time, Sagara gave a gift in a small box to Chidori, which contained earrings and a bracelet. But it's not just any jewelry because he has modified it into a light bomb that, if pulled, will appear light. Feeling annoyed, Chidori accidentally pulled the earring until there was a huge explosion of light in their school. On the other hand, Talitha had arrived at Andre's place to see the whereabouts of her target, which turned out to be Takuma. Arriving in the room, Andre informed that Takuma could operate the Lambda driver, but when Talitha approached him, he immediately rebelled and made her fall in surprise. When they were about to move Takuma, suddenly there was an attack carried out by a robot toward their building. Andre immediately protected Talitha until he was shot. Suddenly, a woman named Sana, riding a robot, came down to look for Takuma's whereabouts, but he was no longer there because someone had taken him. When she came home from school, Chidori thought that Sagara was following her, even though they were in the same direction. She got angry when he talked about his mission again. Arriving at his apartment's door, Sagara felt something strange. He immediately took out his gun and rushed in with a shooting alert. But it turns out that in his room is Talitha, who is carrying Takuma. Suddenly Takuma rebelled and attacked him. Luckily, he was able to handle it. After that, Talitha said that she escaped from a robot attack using an inventory car to carry Takuma, but she was worried about Andre's condition being attacked. Hearing that, Sagara tried to calm her by saying that Andre was not someone who died easily. Fortunately, she finally felt calm. Not long after, someone pressed the doorbell for his room. When Sagara peeked at it, it was Chidori who had come. She wanted to apologize for what happened earlier, but he didn't mind it. She brought a box of food for him, but when she wanted to enter his room, Sagara blocked her because Talitha and Takuma were in his room. Unfortunately, Chidori saw women's shoes in there. At the same time, Talitha came out wearing a towel to ask for a change of clothes, and Sagara looked panicked. After seeing this, Chidori thought that Talitha was his girlfriend. Then she decided to go home, but Talitha told her to come in to explain who she was. After knowing the situation, Chidori calmed down a bit, but she still felt jealous because Talitha and Sagara were alone in the room. According to her, it was inappropriate for them to do so. On the other hand, Andre is being held hostage by Sana while being treated. Sana tells about the A21 organization to Andre. The organization used to recruit naughty children to join their organization, and they were trained on how to survive by assassins. From there, issues developed, and many people labeled them terrorist organizations. Meanwhile, Chidori was seen teasing Takuma, who had been smiling at himself. But when she asked him to talk, he got angry. Luckily, Sagara was able to knock him out. Then, Talitha saw a transmitter in his arm. Afterward, Chidori suggested that they use the heat from the microwave to turn it off. Feeling that her business was over, she excused herself to go home, but Sagara stopped her because she might have become the target of criminals. Shortly after, Sagara and Talitha agreed to take Takuma to be held hostage in the school because their troops possibly could have tracked the position of Sagara's apartment. But Chidori acts back because she wants to call the reporters to let them know that she has good news at the moment. Meanwhile, Takuma is surprised because his transmitter has been turned off, but he is sure his friends can find it. However, Sagara intends to kill Takuma, but Talitha does not allow it. Soon after, Chidori and Talitha wanted to go to the toilet together, and they both talked about the ghost rumors in the school. When they arrived at the toilet, they did their own activities until finally, someone attacked them in the toilet. Feeling suspicious that Talitha and Chidori haven't come back yet, Sagara panicked. It turned out that Takuma had called his colleague using Chidori's cell phone, which he had stolen secretly. His colleagues asked to barter hostages on the school grounds. Then, Sagara complied and immediately left for the meeting place they agreed on. Arriving outside, it was seen that there were already several snipers on standby above the school. He asked them to release Talitha, who had no abilities, then Chidori. It turned out that Sagara had a mature plan to escape from there, but Chidori attacked Takuma instead, and Talitha helped him. Sagara's plan automatically fails, and one of the snipers attacks him, but he avoids it by jumping into the classroom through the window. Not long after, Melissa and Kurz came using their robot, but they were too late. When Sana was about to shoot Andre, the troops carrying the hostages and Takuma arrived, so Sana didn't shoot him. After that, Sana slapped Takuma for refusing to obey her orders to take his medicine, but she still felt grateful that he could be saved. While Talitha and Chidori were taken to prison, she felt that day she had done a lot of stupid acts that ended up like that, whereas before, she had always been careful in her actions. On the other hand, Sagara and Kurz were on their way by car to go to Chidori's place. According to Kurz, the act of bartering hostages was a mistake, as Sagara should have followed his instincts, not someone else's request. After a bit of arguing, they finally decided to work together to find the fastest way to the enemy base. After finding a shortcut, it turned out there was a raid, but Kurz immediately broke through and was chased by the police on duty. In prison, Chidori said she was still living with her parents when she graduated from junior high school. Then came a guard who told Chidori and Talitha to go to Andre's room to be taken as hostages. The guard asked Andre to tell him about the Lambda driver when he got there. If he didn't tell them, they would both be victims. After that, Andre pretended to tell him and asked him to come closer, then Talitha killed him. On the other hand, Sagara and Kurz are still being chased by the police. They panicked and accidentally entered their enemy's headquarters. Then Melissa appeared there with several other troops using robots. The police were ready to point their gun at her troops. Inside the enemy base, Chidori, Talitha, and Andre ran toward the room with lots of wires until they finally saw a huge red robot. Shortly after, Takuma and his colleagues were there. Takuma, who had been influenced by his older sister, wanted to scorch the three of them, but suddenly there was a shock which turned out to be because Sagara and Kurz hit their headquarters. Takuma immediately ran towards the robot, but someone shot him. Meanwhile, Chidori, who met Sagara again, immediately hugged him, while Takuma was still indoctrinated by Sana to stay inside the robot even though he was in pain. As a result, Takuma complied with Sana's request, immediately activated the robot, and installed his Lambda driver. When Melissa tried to enter, she was surprised because the ship suddenly lifted. Then, Andre told them all to leave the place immediately. While hanging on Takuma's giant robot, Melissa's robot was caught by the robot's hand. Meanwhile, Sagara and his friends immediately left the place using a car while Melissa was still caught, and what was even worse, her robot was destroyed by Takuma's robot. The robot destroys several other defense robots, then takes out a shield when it is about to be attacked. On the other hand, Andre and Sana finally managed to get out, but unfortunately, suddenly, an iron fell and stabbed him to death. Before dying, Sana said that the giant red robot would be unable to stop unless Takuma wanted to stop. Not long after, Melissa appeared from the water. While Sagara and his friend's car was still being chased by Takuma's robot, Kurz tried to shoot his weapons to the point on the robot. It turned out that Kurz's attack managed to damage part of the robot's body, but Takuma was even angrier. Sagara felt that they couldn't keep running like that and had to put up a fight, so Talitha immediately tried to contact the central military base, knowing that Sagara asked the center to send a robot, but they had to wait several hours. The situation for Sagara and his friends is getting more and more cornered. He asks Chidori to replace his driving position because he will approach the delivered robot while Talitha suddenly faints. Panicked, Chidori drove carelessly to a warehouse. After successfully driving the robot, Sagara immediately attacks the giant robot. But Sagara's attack means nothing, even when his robot is equipped with the Lambda driver. Not long after, Chidori suddenly shivered coldly and could hear Talitha's words. Then she suddenly fainted. After that, Talitha told how to defeat the robot, and as a result, Chidori immediately told Sagara that the weakest part of the robot was in the cooling system. At that point, it could destroy the Lambda driver system. Sagara immediately used his Lambda driver so that he could directly attack that point, and the robot finally managed to fall. After the fight, Talitha returned to her senses while Takuma was in a pitiful state. While at the lakeside, she reveals to Chidori that she likes Sagara. The next day they started their activities. As usual, Talitha was repairing the robot with her colleagues, but they had a hard time. Talitha, who was tired, decided to rest. There she met Melissa, who was drinking alcohol and smoking a lot. Seeing that Talitha was upset and they both had a fight, Melissa invites her to a duel using a robot, and she agrees, but the loser must accept the punishment of traveling the island naked. Since then, Talitha immediately made an announcement about her fight with Melissa. Actually, Melissa was joking, but because Talitha is willing to fight, she will fight. Talitha said she was determined to beat Melissa and called Sagara to teach her to ride a robot. Because of that, Sagara was forced to train Talitha, but she slipped and fell on his body while climbing the stairs into the robot. As a result, training that day from morning to evening was only to climb the stairs. After Talitha managed to climb up, Sagara asked her to run the robot, but the robot immediately wobbled and fell into the sea. At a club, Melissa and Kurz are seen drinking alcohol together. Kurz asks her to reconsider their fight as they are close friends. The next day, Talitha returned to learning to ride a robot, and she continued to look for ways to win the match. She felt that Sagara was underestimating her abilities, but from there, they started discussing other things that came up with good ideas. In the afternoon, Melissa and Kurz were waiting for Talitha's arrival. Soon, she appeared using a robot designed to be easy to control by Talitha. The match started, and she told Melissa not to hesitate to fight her. Actually, Melissa could easily beat Talitha, but thanks to Talitha and Sagara's plans, Melissa always failed when she attacked her. Melissa, who felt annoyed, finally decided to give a surprise attack on Talitha by shooting her continuously until she felt tired of avoiding Melissa's attacks. In the actual battle, Melissa got a moment to defeat Talitha, but it turned out to be just a trick because Talitha's robot was behind her. As a result, Talitha continues to attack her until she admits her defeat. Soon Talitha came crying and hugged Melissa, so they both made up again. But Kurz asked them to carry out the punishment. Namely, the loser had to go around naked, but that didn't apply to both of them and instead turned to scold him. Long story short, a man named Shintaro Kazama is holding a toy robot. He is Kazama's father. On the other hand, Chidori imagines her summer vacation with Sagara, but she is invited to the Narashino Army Defense Party that Shintaro will attend. Soon after Shintaro arrived, Sagara immediately behaved professionally like a military man. It looks very crowded there because many are trading and some are cosplaying. On the other hand, Chidori and her friends sitting were approached by a man named Akagi, who wanted to participate in the festival because there was a competition and his team always won every year. Then he invites her to take control of the robot with him, but she refuses. It even made Mizuki annoyed because Akagi wasn't invited. Not long after, the event began. The competition they held was like a sports competition but by driving a robot. It can be seen that Narashino's team always loses, while the Naruma team always wins by cheating. The next fight is table tennis, but Naruma's team is cheating again. It makes Sagara furious, and he joins the match. He uses robot cosplay to avoid being caught. As a result, Narashino's team wins. After the match, Shintaro invites Sagara to talk to ask him to lead his team in the final match until he bows down in front of Sagara. This annoys Kazuma because his father is a military man who can't control robots and looks useless. Shortly after, Sagara slaps Kazuma because Shintaro's position as a military secretary is very important behind the scenes. Finally, Sagara was willing to help him and participate in the match. On the other hand, an annoyed Chidori is invited to join a robot duel by Akagi. After knowing his opponent is Sagara, she is excited and wants to follow him. The next game is to pop the balloon on the enemy's head, but Shintaro feels confused, so they have to turn the guide on how to control the robot. Soon afterward, Chidori continues to target the robot Sagara but always misses. Due to constant attacks from Naruma's team, the members of Narashino's team began to fall one by one until finally, Kazama and his father had to work hard to defeat Naruma's team. Long story short, Narashino's team finally won after losing every year. After the program, they took the train home, but Chidori still said she wanted to go to the beach for a vacation. The next day, Chidori's friends want to accompany her on vacation to the beach, but she still looks gloomy. It turns out that Sagara did not go on vacation because Talitha was given the assignment to join the Indian Ocean unit to go to Helmagistan. There is a reason why they recruited Sagara because he already knew the place and had experience fighting the criminal they were after, Goron, who was still alive. Sagara accepts the mission, but Talitha worries about him because several people teaming up with him seem to underestimate their mission. Arriving on the military plane, they saw Sagara as a lowly senior high school student, and they didn't even want to accept his advice. When the plane was in Helmagistan's airspace, the military was lowered from the air. Then they immediately monitored the surrounding area. They hide while observing the enemy's movement. Then they see Goron, who has not yet climbed his robot. The squad captain named Bill devised a plan and asked them to block Goron's troops, but Sagara did not agree with his plan because there was a dangerous Goron, especially if he had climbed a robot. Then his strength was difficult to beat. Unfortunately, Sagara's opinion was not respected by them. Finally, Sagara relented and followed Bill's direction. They immediately got into their respective robots while waiting for Goron's troops to pass. But Sagara hesitated because suddenly Goron was not in the ranks of his troops, so there was an argument that ordered them to attack. However, Sagara asked them to hold back because it was dangerous, but because Bill was in charge of the plan, he shot Goron's troop transport, resulting in a fight. While fighting, they look for the invisible Goron, but there is a robot that lights up there. Then a male member named Battis confronted the red robot. He immediately attacked him and underestimated his enemy, which he finally stabbed. The situation is getting more chaotic. Moreover, what Goron's troops are carrying are nuclear weapons. They had to secure the item, but it was prevented by Goron, who came out using his robot. Bill and his friends are very optimistic that they want to fight him and suddenly take steps to attack Goron's robot. After that, Goron immediately used his Lambda driver to return Bill's attack until his robot was scorched. On the other hand, two of Sagara's male colleagues, Andy and Jackson, tried to fight Goron. Still, he immediately blocked Goron's attack using his Lambda driver, resulting in an explosion. The situation was immediately used by Sagara and the others to escape while carrying the nuclear, while the Goron robot was still unable to move because of the earlier fight. After that, they were still being chased by the red robot because they still had a stash of bullets, but the 5 of them had no way to escape. Suddenly, Jackson thought of throwing the nukes to the bottom of the abyss, but Sagara didn't agree because he wanted them all to go down too. There are many hills, so they can all hide, so they distract the red robot and go to the bottom of the ravine. Arriving at the bottom of the ravine, Baddest immediately collapsed in pain, but their male colleague named Gray only had 1 painkiller left. Their current position is very cornered, plus the nukes they are currently securing. Then Sagara wants to fight him because it's not necessarily safe, even if they keep running away. Unfortunately, they all disagreed except Baddest because he had realized that what Sagara said from the start was true. They finally agree, except for Gray, who wants to heal Baddest's wounds first and looks for a doctor. But if they went to the city, it would take 10 hours. Sagara then asked them to visit his small base camp first but had to take a detour, and they all agreed. On the way, Sagara says he had gorillas at a young age. When he was 8 years old, he joined the war with his friend, a man named Zayed, but he died. But it turns out that Zayed is the one who helps Goron's mission. He tells where Sagara will go. While Sagara and his friends have arrived at their destination, he immediately looks for surgical tools to help Baddest in a box. Luckily the equipment was still there, so Gray used it to dissect Baddest while Sagara stood guard outside base camp. After Gray came out, Sagara told him that the place had been used for shelter, but because Goron knew the place, they had to leave it immediately. At that time, Zayed was hit by Goron's attack. Meanwhile, Sagara was assigned to be a spy, so he survived. Then Gray tells his area that off in wars. Worse yet, he once had a mission to fight, but no one wanted to help him until the war ended. Gray asks where Sagara lives, but he doesn't even know where he lives because he always gets war missions that move from place to place. On the other hand, Chidori was thinking about Sagara, who was on his mission, but Melissa tried to calm her down. At base camp, they make a plan, but Zayed knows the plan, and both know the place. As a result, when Sagara underwent a very mature plan, Goron and his troops attacked him directly from behind, making his plan fail. Turned out, Zayed seemed to have prepared up there. Then, Sagara, with his tenacity, tried to destroy the helicopter there. Shortly after, Goron ordered Zayed to kill Sagara. Hearing that, Zayed followed his orders and didn't care even though Sagara was his friend because the mission still had to be completed. Sagara was bothered by Zayed's attack from behind him. Sagara was suspicious of his current position. Moreover, his enemy was very aware of his movements. Then, he took advantage of the storm there to kill his enemies. He wonders who the person behind the red robot is. He finally saw the person, and it was Zayed. Soon after, he tries to communicate with him but fails. On the other hand, Gray gets into trouble because Goron is near him and the others. Sagara then runs away from Zayed to help them. Because of that, Gray looks very panicked, then activates his shot. However, it doesn't affect Goron's robot. Instead, it kills Andri. Shortly afterward, Jackson and Gray try to make trouble for Goron. Unfortunately, Jackson gets stabbed and can't continue the fight anymore. Seeing that, Baddest immediately jumped into the battlefield to help them to the last drop of blood. He rode Jackson's robot. Afterward, Baddest tries to kill himself, while Jackson runs away with the nuclear. However, it was in vain because Goron could attack him before he managed to blow himself up. Sadly, Jackson had been stabbed from above, now only Gray. But his strength is not comparable to Goron's, so Gray is stabbed to death by Goron. Knowing that all his friends were dead, Sagara felt angry and immediately stabbed Zayed's robot in the stomach. Even though he was sure that the red robot was driven by Zayed, he didn't care anymore. After that, Sagara rushed to the location of his friends. Unfortunately, he saw that all of his colleagues had died horribly. This makes him angry, and he searches for Goron, who turns out to be above him. Then, he issued his Lambda driver, and there was trouble. Surprisingly, when Sagara was about to attack him, Goron was no longer there. Instead, Zayed was behind him and prepared to kill him. But because Zayed was already so weak that his shots missed. Soon after, Sagara finished the mission alone with the nukes. Long story short, Goron returns to base. He received threats for failing again in his mission, but he did not accept being said that and shot the 2 men immediately. Afterward, he took a VCD Toys box cassette from the pocket of one of the men. After carrying out his mission, Sagara returns to school. Chidori told him to build a festival gate. Instead, he made a kind of fortress to make it safer. Kazama didn't mind it either, unlike Chidori, who thought Sagara was too much because all their funds had been spent on just making the gate. Suddenly, Chidori accidentally hit something at the gate, and red spray hit her body. Because of that, he was very annoyed with Sagara. Then, he invited her to the southern island alone and promised to take care of her. Hearing that, Chidori accepted his offer. Afterward, she was hit by another spray from the gate made by Sagara. Arriving home, Chidori immediately prepared the clothes she would wear while on vacation with Sagara. On the other hand, some submarines almost collided because they were already 100 meters away. Strangely, when another submarine was about to approach, it suddenly disappeared, so there was no collision. Shortly after, one crew member said it was a ghost submarine using a toy box. At the military base, Talitha is discussing with a male military officer named Richard Henry Marjukas about the place they will visit, Pasadena. But she changed her mind because of the sale of dangerous goods in the area, so she chose to go south. Meanwhile, Sagara and Chidori are already preparing to take a vacation using a private plane. But her mood dropped slightly when he told her they were going with Talitha too. On the plane, Chidori became indifferent and chose to look at the view from the window, while Sagara was confused about what to do. Until finally, there was a call on the plane for him. It turned out to be from Kurz, who asked him to change his goal, to go to their headquarters instead. Because it was so sudden, Sagara and Chidori immediately changed their clothes and prepared to jump off the plane. When she was in front of the plane door, Chidori felt scared, but she dared to jump with Sagara and landed on the sea. It wasn't long before they both managed to get into the submarine. Talitha then told Sagara to continue his journey while she and Chidori went for a walk to see the contents of the submarine. While traveling, Talitha invited Chidori to meet her subordinate military troops to welcome her. Chidori was very flattered to receive a warm welcome from the soldiers. After that, they would prepare for the submarine's birthday party. During the party, Kurz gave a game. If the number they held was the same as the opposite sex, they would get a kiss from Talitha. It turned out that the one who got the same number was a gentleman. Then he got a kiss on his cheek from Talitha. On the other hand, Goron gets the next mission to find Talitha's submarine because there is Chidori. After the party was over, Chidori, Melissa, and Talitha soaked in hot water together. Talitha said that the place was originally for cleaning submarine parts. Still, now it was turned into a hot spring which became her favorite place. Chidori asks about where Talitha lives. It turns out she was born in Okinawa. Chidori is curious about what Sagara's childhood was like. Melissa didn't even know it because she only knew Sagara a year ago. Soon afterward, Melissa told about the first time she met Sagara. Melissa wanted to find a partner for her mission because her previous partner was injured. At first, she thought Sagara was a polite man, but at that time, he still didn't have any marksmanship, in contrast to Kurz, who immediately became close to Melissa. But Melissa heard the news that Sagara could control a robot that was very difficult to control and could defeat his enemies. Hearing this, she was curious to meet him. Melissa then went to his place, but when she asked about his skill, Sagara humbled himself. Not long after that, Kurz came there. After that, there was the news of the hostage taking. The criminal asked for millions of dollars. Shortly after, Melissa went straight to the hostage place to carry out an ambush, but the troops were already feeling scared. Then she was curious about the abilities of Kurz and Sagara, and she asked them to carry out her plan that had been prepared. The plan was Kurz would be part of the sniper, Sagara would enter the enemy robot, and Melissa will lure their enemy. Finally, her lure was successful, and Kurz could shoot the robot's weak point. Soon after, Sagara managed to get into the enemy robot and prepared to start his battle. Seeing that, they were amazed when Sagara issued the skill to control the robot, even though it did not have legs. From that moment on, Melissa is interested in recruiting Kurz and Sagara. When they finished bathing and were about to leave the bath, it turned out that Kurz was eavesdropping on their conversation, followed by Sagara, who came. After that, Sagara invited Chidori to go around again on the submarine. It looks like the ship's room already looks neat and different from the party earlier. Talitha then invites Chidori to talk about the whispered they now have. The whispered they both have is the power of resonance, where they can chat inside the soul to communicate with each other even though they are far apart. But if they always use that power, they can get memory loss. Talitha revealed that Chidori was brought there because someone was stalking her. On the other hand, Andre gave directions to his subordinates to carry out a bomb disposal mission and save the hostages. Unfortunately, there was Goron. Andre then told them to run away if they met Goron. However, his subordinates did not believe that Goron was strong. Andre emphasized that it was an order. If anyone violated it, they would receive punishment or be ready to die. There, Sagara will become a boomerang for the others because he is experienced. After that, Kurz and Melissa were getting ready, and they both felt grateful for the previous mission. Sagara was still able to survive, but maybe he was still thinking about what happened. Not long after, Chidori came to meet Sagara, but Melissa informed her that Sagara was currently preparing for the next mission, and Chidori came back again. When everyone was ready to leave, Talitha immediately ordered them to slide. While the mission was in progress, something strange happened. Melissa's partner said he was lazy to work with Mithril and those on the same team as Kurz. He was bored because the pay he got was not enough. Arriving at their destination, they immediately carry out their mission by defusing bombs and releasing the hostages, then fighting enemy robots. So far, they had not seen Goron, but suddenly Melissa saw him. Shortly after Goron shot Sagara, he immediately took over the front position to protect his partner. When Sagara was about to activate his Lambda driver, suddenly, it couldn't be activated. Then, Melissa helped him, who was almost hit by Goron's attack. As a result, she is hit by Goron's Lambda driver. Seeing her, Sagara immediately takes her away, but they are still being chased by Goron. Afterward, Kurz tells Sagara to go towards the building, then Kurz shoots the building until it collapses on Goron. Surprisingly, Goron gave up. Shortly after, helicopter troops evacuated Melissa, who was seriously injured. After seeing her condition, Sagara felt very angry. Andre, who had just arrived there, was suspicious of Goron's actions. He asked his troops to remain vigilant against Goron. Then Andre will negotiate with the Americans shortly after the evacuation helicopter arrives to take Melissa and Sagara to the military base. Upon arrival, Melissa immediately received treatment, while Sagara still wore an annoyed face. Not long after, Chidori approached him. Sagara told her that he felt he failed in this mission because Melissa was injured to save him. Sagara kept blaming himself because he failed to activate his Lambda drive. Chidori, who gave input to him, was scolded by him, then she left him alone while crying. Kurz, who was eavesdropping, immediately hit Sagara because he had vented his emotions on Chidori until she cried. On the other hand, Talitha is examining Goron's robot, but no major damage is found. She becomes suspicious of him. On the other hand, while crying, Chidori was seen talking to a male chef in the kitchen. He told her to sleep, but she didn't want to. Meanwhile, Goron is being guarded by two men. Alan looks sleepy, but his friend beside him points a gun and betrays Mithril. The man let go of Goron, but the two of them had an argument, leading to a bit of a fight. After that, they went to the control room, but other members had been ordered to spy on his movements. Unexpectedly, there was another traitor in Mithril, so the man was killed. Unexpectedly, Chidori passed in front of Goron. She was immediately arrested and taken to the control room. At that time, Talitha could not do anything. Finally, Goron ordered the controllers to change their destination. At first, Talitha refused, but she obeyed his orders for their safety. What's worse, Goron takes out a toy box to be input into the submarine system so that he can control the entire submarine system. At first, he blamed the alarm as if again there was danger and gathered everyone at one point. But Sagara, looking for Chidori, was forced to disobey orders. Then he met Kurz, who would accompany him. Near their submarine, another submarine noticed that one of their closest submarines was using a toy box. After Goron gathered everyone at one point, he would overload the room with oxygen and close all the doors to make all the troops feel dizzy. This was actually done by him to make everyone feel panicked. Soon after, Talitha thought of finding a way so she could control the ship again. She uses her resonance with Chidori by telling her where to control the ship and then gives her the private key and the code. But accidentally, Chidori was noisy until finally caught by Goron. Because of that, Talitha immediately shoots Goron, then Chidori immediately runs away. Meanwhile, Andre was landing on a ship to negotiate. The ship's captain warned him and asked him about the toy box, but he didn't know. When the ship's captain was about to approach his men, he was told that there was a submarine using the toy box around them. Because of that, Andre was accused of being the submarine owner. After everything was detected, Goron fired at the submarine being boarded by Andre. As a result, they could stop one, and the other hit the ship's hull. Andre was about to be shot by the captain. The other submarine heard the sound of the explosion and wanted to retaliate. Not long after, Chidori was finally able to enter Talitha's room. There she found a chip and accidentally saw a photo of Talitha with Sagara while practicing riding a robot on the beach. When Chidori leaves the room to look for the place in question, she meets an enemy. At the same time, Sagara, who was going to the canteen, was blocked by his colleague because it was certain that Chidori was in there. Kurz told Sagara to run away first. Then, he immediately ran and met Chidori, who was cornered. Luckily, Sagara was able to stop the man quickly. After that, Chidori, who was previously said to be a burden to him, didn't want to hear those words again. But Sagara didn't mean it that way, especially since she always helped him when he was in trouble. On the other hand, Andre is still cornered. He must convince the captain to trust him. Goron turned out to have an even crazier plan. He wanted to make the submarine brought under the sea at a depth of 1500. Soon after, Chidori and Sagara finally arrived at the place Talitha intended. They went straight into the capsule while Kurz was still bothered by his treacherous friend. He tried to find a way, but unfortunately, Kurz couldn't duel at close range until he was hit by an attack. Not long after that, Melissa woke up and immediately attacked the man. She heard the sound of the alarm, so she woke up, but she was still not fit, so she fainted again. Even the submarine Talitha had suffered a lot of damage, but Goron was still pushing the ship. Afterward, the submarine can be controlled by Chidori and can be controlled again. Luckily, they were not shot by another ship's furious attack. Then they headed up again together with Sagara, who fired his gun at Goron. Fortunately, the ship was already above, so they bounced off. Then Goron took advantage of the situation to escape. Sagara then looks for Goron, who doesn't know where to go. Soon after, a shadow of Chidori informs Goron's whereabouts, namely to the hangar. Hearing that, Talitha called Richard, who was in the hangar, to tell him the truth. She said that Goron was currently hiding in the ship. Not long after Richard saw someone suspicious wearing Mithril clothes, he walked towards the red robot. Seeing this, Richard shouted, then Goron fired at them continuously. As a result, Goron managed to enter and take control of the robot. Fortunately, Sagara was there on time, so they decided to duel in the submarine, full of anger and revenge. After that, Sagara immediately opens the fight by attacking him. He continues to dominate the duel until he breaks Goron's robot sensor, but Goron still has a lambda driver, so his robot still has power. However, Sagara did not give up. He had that power and immediately returned to attack Goron's robot. This time, he could torture Goron until his robot was destroyed. Strangely, Goron's robot is still strong. Then, Goron plans to blow himself up. Simultaneously, a storm outside caused the submarine to keep swinging and suffered a lot of damage. Chidori, who was in control, brought Sagara up and opened the roof to fly. The people in the control room panicked because the roof opened by itself. Then she said not to worry. However, Sagara was still locked and couldn't go anywhere while he had less than 20 seconds left before it exploded. Luckily, Chidori told him something about her plan, so he followed her plan. Long story short, Goron's robot exploded while sinking. They were going to cover the roof of the submarine, and Sagara just saved himself and climbed on the body of the submarine. He looked still emotional because of Goron. Then they close the roof of the submarine and go back under the sea. After that, Talitha attended to the remaining crew in the submarine. It seemed that several of her subordinates had died. Then they brought the bodies of their comrades to be buried, while she felt sad. Seeing this, Chidori ordered Sagara to comfort her, but she couldn't say anything and immediately burst into tears while hugging Sagara. The next day, Chidori tidied her clothes to go home, but before that, Sagara invited her somewhere, and she finally agreed. It turns out that she was taken away to his fishing spot, and only he knows the place. Actually, the purpose of coming there was an impromptu mission from Talitha, so Sagara was forced to carry out his mission. But they can still enjoy their vacation, even if it's only for a short time. The anime ends. The moral lesson is not to think that the enemy we will face is weak because really great people sometimes look weak.